Hello, guys. As you probably should know, my name is Billy Graeff. I am from the University of uh, the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and I'm really glad I'm here to talk to you about the darker side of sports policy. I'm going to be focusing on sport mega events and sport policy as well. The way I wanted to do this is throughout my own research. I may mention other people's research and quote some of them, but mainly I'm going to show you the things I have been doing in the past few years. And I thought that it would be nice for you because also you could ask me direct questions about my research, their results, methodologies, and so on. I even put here this image to show you how far from you I am. So I'm from the south of Brazil. I am a gaúcho, and because of that, I have a strong accent. So if you do not understand anything I say, please make a note. And afterwards, towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to be with you, and then we can discuss your doubts, and I can answer almost all questions you are going to ask me. Okay, let's go then. So, the first piece of research I wanted to show you is this one. It is called Continuity, Change and Rupture in Brazilian Sport, Reflections from the Profile of the Ministers of Sport and the Budget of the Ministry of Sport. So when I came back from the UK, I spent 4 years in the UK in Loughborough. I came back in 2018, and I noticed that things had changed here in Brazil in relation to sports policy, and nobody was actually trying to understand what was going on. So I decided to take a look at the profiles of the ministers of sport, and it was a very confusing time in Brazil. Since 2013, we had a few uh, quasi revolutions in Brazil with people on the streets and government changes, the impeachment of President Dilma, and then towards the end of this period, even the extinction of the Ministry of Sport. So what I found out first is that sport had been one of the top topics for policy in Brazil in general, and a lot of money was put into sports throughout that period. That period was known as the golden decade of sport in Brazil, mainly because of sport mega events. And I noticed that the ministers of sport changed from people related to sports or that decided to go into sports in order to do their jobs to people that were just appointed by some specific parties that were in the coalition of the government. First, Dilma, which was a less strong uh, uh, government in relation to President Lula, but also then Temer, who took over Dilma after the coup, the impeachment, and then of course Bolsonaro, whose government has been a disaster for sports in Brazil, and now we don't even have a Ministry of Sports anymore. And one of the most interesting aspects of this research is that we were able to show how the elites in Brazil organized themselves in order to get money using the narrative of sport mag events. So they borrowed it, and then they managed to transfer money from the state coffers to their companies. For example, five four of the main construction companies in the world are Brazilian. These four formed another one. So they had five companies, construction companies in Brazil throughout the period of sport mag events. And towards the end of this period, all of their CEOs, so all the presidents of these companies, were in jail because of contracts relating to the World Cup in 2014 and the Olympics in 2016. And also, we managed to show how, depending on the political situation, they would be or wouldn't be able to convince the Congress to approve more money for sports, and then in specific years, depending on the type of construction and development projects that they would have, they would manage and get this money. I'm going to show you later, more than 90% of the money spent with the World Cup, for example, was later discovered, ended up in the coffers of the construction companies. So we are kind of circulating around a few issues that I think are important for our discussion here, and then afterwards we are going to go into sport mag events and their consequences for real people here in Brazil. So this one it was published in the Agora's journal, which is a journal specific for Olympic studies. So you have to be invited to publish in this journal, but it is a peer-reviewed journal, and it is quite important as well in the field. What my colleague and me, we try to do is that we try to see how human rights and the Olympic movement constructed their relationship. We have some historical records of this relationship, mainly because many of the initiatives relating to human rights before the World War II started at the same period as the modern Olympic movement. But then, more recently, this relationship has been not so clear. So we decided to take a look on how this issue of human rights are impacted by Olympic Games in specific countries. And I guess one of the nice things that we did in this specific paper is that we reviewed a lot of reports and also literature in order to find out what were the issues relating to human rights that specific editions of the Olympic Games were linked to. And I'm going to show you this next. So in this table that we constructed, it was a bit surprising for us because Olympic games are always involved with this narrative of development, of social good. But then we found out that almost every edition of the Olympic Games in this century has been marked by human rights issues, which was not a surprise, but the volume of information regarding this topic and the fact that this is not very well mentioned in the academic literature was a bit surprising for us. So knowing that, for example, the creation of exception laws is very common within the world of sport mag events and the Olympics in particular, and also denial of the right to information, every type of discrimination of race, homeless people and migrants also was very present in these reports, in this material that we reviewed, and economic abuse, economic exploitation of specific populations and also of specific countries, especially in the developing world, and also forced evictions are very common within the world of the Olympics. Expulsion of specific populations, especially the poor, and police brutality, which is almost omnipresent when you bring games to some place. So the way I have been presenting now, that I'm showing some issues that may seem not related, but they are not totally unrelated. And next, I'm going to try and see how they are connected to broader trends, but also to specific happenings that took place in Brazil. Okay, so coming back to Brazil, one of the main, so three of the main motivations for countries and cities to apply to be hosts of a World Cup or of the Olympics is image projection, economic advancements, and legacies. So in terms of legacies, it's a very difficult discussion. First, because legacy is an endemic category, which means that it has been created by defenders and promoters of sport mag events in order to fit the events into a narrative that is positive for them. In terms of economic advancements, it's very difficult to measure that as well because you cannot compare with other country. If you have the Olympics or the World Cup in a specific country or city, you're not going to have another one that's going to have also in the same year the Olympics or the World Cup. So you cannot measure that. And also in terms of image projection, it is said that when you host an Olympics or a World Cup, a sport mega event, you're going to be able to show your country or your city, your region now, if you prefer. And that in a way, you're going to be able to control this image that you project. But that's not totally true, isn't it? So, for example, in the world of sport mega events today, if you mention, for example, Beijing, uh, uh, and then you're going to talk about human rights issues, especially the right to free speech. If you mention Qatar, for example, then we are going to be talking about, even some would mention slavery, or at least labor rights. And then we were curious about how Brazil had displayed this capacity of projecting a certain image. And here in Brazil, when they were trying to convince the public opinion and also the politics in order to support the bids for the sport mega events, they would say that Brazil would be shown internationally as a very modern and country, and also a place in which you could invest and get a lot of profit, and also that Brazil was rapidly developing from a developing country into a developed country. So then we went and took a look at the news in several different uh, uh, journals around the newspapers around the world. Then we published this paper in a journal called Third World Quarterly, talking about how Brazil was seen throughout these newspapers in England, Italy, France, the United States, and other countries. What we found out is that although there was a doubt about Brazil being able to produce the World Cup and the Olympics, and specifically the World Cup, in the end, Brazil shown to be capable. But that wasn't a surprise because Brazil had organized another World Cup in 1950. And also, we shown that Brazil was portrayed as having a splendorous nature and a lot of sites for visiting. That wasn't also a surprise. The only change about that is that in the 50s, the main location for that would be Rio de Janeiro. And now, throughout the news that we reviewed, other places would be shown as well, especially in the northeast of Brazil, and also some in the north relating to the Amazon, and also some countryside as well, as Foz do Iguaçu, the falls that are in the south of Brazil. And then finally, one of the things that was very important in this set of news that was collected throughout the month of the World Cup in 2014 is that Brazil was shown as a very unequal society. So the contrast between the elites and the people living in places like favelas was a very important topic for these newspapers, which is totally different from what the Brazilian government, especially the federal government, but also the state governments, were saying about what Brazil would look like if we would invest billions of dollars in sport mag events here. Now I'm going to move to more specific research on the impacts of sport mag events, and particularly the World Cup in Brazil, and specifically in the city of Porto Alegre, the capital city of my state here, which is Rio Grande do Sul. I'm going to show you some of the features of this research that was published in this book by Routledge called Capitalism, Sport Mag Events, and the Global South. So there's a very specific set of discussion at the beginning of the book, but we are not going to be able to go deeper into that. We are going to focus on the data, on the field research, okay?